Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews, and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigus.
Welcome everyone back to the Fly Culture Podcast. I'm pleased to welcome my guest back to the podcast today, as I'm keen to learn about his latest fly fishing adventures and to learn about his new book, The Fish of a Lifetime. He is photographer, writer, fly angler, and good man, Matt Harris. Matt, it's great to have you back on the podcast. How are you doing?
Pete, I'm great, and it's great to see you again, obviously. It just seems like yesterday. It's over a year ago that we spoke, which I just looked up. I thought I better not say too many things that I said last time, so I had a quick listen to what we talked about last time. That was a year ago, which is amazing. And so much has happened in that time. Not all good. You know, we've had all the wretched business of Vladimir Putin doing all the hideous things that he's done. But we're back out with, COVID is not behind us, but starting to maybe recede a little. It's nice to see old friends that I haven't been able to see, like I'm sure you and many others, as we start to travel again and start to see people that we weren't able to see. So it's been great. It's been a very very eventful year and a great year. So all's good.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that. And like you say, it's gone incredibly quick. We're sitting here and it's very early December, and I'm thinking, where the hell did that go? And it has been a blur. And I suppose for you as well, in if we can call it the post-COVID world, because of course it's not really. But although we're allowed to travel, does that mean you've been? Obviously, we're going to come on to the book a little bit later. But does that mean you've been out doing your thing and you've been traveling the world with a fly rod and a camera?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does with a vengeance. Yeah, absolutely. When we spoke last time, I'd just come back from Cuba, and I'd had an amazing week there with an old friend, Koki, who's, I think I alluded to him last time, one of my absolute heroes, one of the best guides I've ever fished with, someone who really taught me how to fish in salt water with a fly rod. And I fished with a mate of mine, Doug Behrman, and I don't know if you remember, but I was describing how Koki, who's this fiery little Latin character, was beating up on both Doug and I, and Doug's caught 100 and something permit. I've caught 40 odd. And Koki doesn't care. He's still on your case. And nothing had, COVID had not softened him. If anything, it had sharpened up his repertoire. So we got beaten up. We caught some lovely permit. I think we had 4 Grand Slams, and we had a great time. And that was just before I spoke to you last time. Doug Behrman subsequently told me to come and fish for redfish with him in Louisiana, which I did in, I think it was late January. And I absolutely loved it. I just loved it. Fantastic. I mean, I loved the whole thing. I loved the atmosphere of the, the bayou, those endless marshes, around the Mississippi Delta there's such an atmosphere, those misty mornings. It's cold. Doug's a really tough old stick. It's in my book, by the way, that Doug was a seal, which people who aren't American may be scratching their head. A seal was basically the equivalent of our special services or SAS or whatever. And it was a tough guy, a very tough man. But he got a very serious knee injury. Then he retired to become a businessman, and he's fished, probably as many places I have. He's just the loveliest man you'll ever meet. He's 77. And he invited me to fish with a brilliant guy called Jason Catchings. And Doug's caught IGFA world record redfish with Jason. And we had a ball. And the book was actually finished at that point. And I remember thinking, until we go to print, it's open. Until we say, right, we're going to print. And there were two fish I really wanted to get into that book. And we talked about the other one last time as well. And I managed to squeeze them in. The other one was a milkfish. So I caught a 30-pound redfish with Doug, which was just, I mean, they're like easy permit, if that makes sense, Pete. They are big. They're in water that's not much deeper than their bodies are. So, you'll find them in a foot of water. But the water's, you often fish in winter, which we did, so the sun's low. The water's often quite got quite a heavy tannin stain from the swamps. But they're gold. I mean, they're magnificent. And I was so snippy about them. I remember saying to Doug that they looked like a coppery cod, which he took real exception to. Uh, and I remember on the way back, he just laughed and laughed because I had to say, I'm really sorry. I love them. Can I come back? And I really want to get back there. A friend of mine, Katka Grover, is an incredibly talented girl, or lady, I should say. Katka must be in her early 30s now, who is a fellow Hardy ambassador. She's just been out with another friend, Meredith McCord, who's another brilliant, very talented lady, and Simon, funnily enough, with Simon Gorsworth. And she was just waxing lyrical about these redfish. So that was just a brilliant trip. And the whole, I cannot recommend it enough. The atmosphere of the place. I don't know where Jason, he didn't blindfold us, but I've no idea where we were. We were somewhere, off the Louisiana shoreline. That's all I can tell you. We didn't see a soul all day, every day. We never saw another boat. We never saw anything except a lot of very big redfish, and black drum, which are they're these big, lazy, they call them swamp donkeys. And I love them. And Doug would scowl if it was a black drum because we take turns with shots. And Doug had a 40-something pounder, big fish. But you have to put that fly right on their nose, which I love. I think it's great fishing. The redfish are a bit more active, a bit more obliging. But it was just the best time. And I can't thank Doug or Jason Catchings enough for just a really special time. And so that was the first trip of 2022. And then I went to Colombia with a great mate, Matty Roberts, who I fished for pike with, and seeing Matt, who's very, very skillful at that sort of sunk line streamer fishing for peacock bass. He's got the game for that, and he just loved it. And it was and a few other friends, Mike Martins, Bill Cowan. We just had Colombia is a magic place. And unfortunately, I don't know if you know this, Pete, but they've just decided to close Colombia to sport fishing because somebody in the government is fishing's cruel. Well, I don't know if they've closed farming or all the other cruel things that go on. But anyway, so I've got a lot of good friends in Colombia. Beto, who runs Fish Colombia, is a great young guy, very, very entrepreneurial, very pioneering. Armando, who runs a thing called Orinoco Flies, lovely guy. Just great people, lovely people, and that's their livelihood. And so I've written to the Colombian government. We did a piece in a magazine called In the Loop, which is an online magazine, and I'd urge people to try and make a noise on behalf of the fishing community, because that revenue Colombia was in the toilet 20 years ago. 200,000 people dead in the last 30 years. No one. I mean, it would be a joke to say. I remember having to fly from Los Roques to Caracas, and then we got rerouted to Bogota, and it was like going into the seventh circle of hell. I was terrified, and I was roughed up by a policeman who got his gun out and basically was trying to steal my cameras. And I literally ran. I ran through security, and I didn't see him again. But it was very, very scary, and that was 2003. So 20 years on. It's a wonderful, vibrant country, amazing fishing, saltwater and freshwater, big peacock bass, huge payara, which we call, a world-class payara, which are the ones with the big teeth, for anyone who doesn't know, the vampire fish. And saltwater, the yellowfin tuna, mahi-mahi. I've got a great mate, Alex Rook, who I saw has just been out, and I need to catch up with Alex. He was catching these huge mahi-mahi on fly. I've had days when we've caught so many yellowfin tuna off the Colombian coast that you just don't want to catch another one, you just want to lie down. And it's all threatened because of this idiotic notion that fishing, we could talk for hours. Is fishing cruel? Well, to me, fishing is something that human beings have done since time immemorial. And they're fish, they're not people. And there's a lot of things we do that are far more morally questionable than fishing. So I would really like to see the Colombian government recognize all of that incoming, revenue stream that goes to Bahia Solano, where we fish for yellowfin, a lot of very poor people there, and if you can bring some foreign investment, some income, while remaining sustainable, catch and release fishing on the whole, you can harvest some yellowfin tuna for sure. But so I'd urge people to look at that issue, get involved, look at Fish Colombia site, look at all the Colombian sites, Armando's Orinoco flies, and send them messages of support, and see if there is a petition on Armando's site. It's in the Loop article that we wrote last month. So have a look at that and see if you can help sign the petition and so on. Because they're lovely. I mean, people are lovely everywhere. It's a cliche to say they're lovely people. I've got a lot of very lovely Russian friends. Vladimir Putin isn't one of them, obviously, but people are people, but they need support. And, if we don't speak out, it will be our country next where people say, oh, we should stop fishing. So we need to unite and help these people.
Yeah, and you make some really interesting points there about, and we were having lunch yesterday, funnily enough, and it was a place in Tiverton. Food was excellent. I couldn't fault it, but they had a salmon pizza. It sounds weird anyway.
It is weird.
And Emma this morning is writing to them. We didn't make a big thing about it,
yeah.
But she's written to them. She sent them our leaflet. And the people we're with aren't anglers, and we were talking about salmon. They knew about the campaign that we've been trying to do with the leaflets, and as have many other people. And one of the points I made was that, these people who are anti-fishing, that's great, but they won't be standing up for the fish.
No.
They won't be doing
Correct.
anything if a river's
Correct.
polluted, if there is an issue with salmon that we have, or if they had with the Dorado that they have there, or whatever. They won't be doing anything. And that's the big difference. So if they didn't have us, the fish wouldn't be cared for, and we might wipe them out. Absolutely. And that's the big problem I have. And it's interesting you talked about redfish as well, because that was an interesting story. I think it was, to start with, it's right on my radar. And I know there's been a vibrant scene for quite some time now. And we had Alex Clare, who's super cool, wrote a piece in the autumn edition about his trip down to Louisiana. You said Simon Gorsworth. I saw the pictures of some huge, great redfish he caught the other day. Right. And now that's a good enough reason for me to want to go down there and give them a go. But I think that was a species, and I could be incorrect in this, that was it Second World War or First World War, they were encouraging the population to eat redfish.
Yes.
And it almost wiped out the population. Correct. And now they've gradually come back.
That is correct. But also there was a famous chef called Paul Prudhomme, I think his name was, Prudhomme, which I guess is a French name, and he popularised a dish called blackened Cajun redfish, and that nearly wiped out there. I think that was the 80s. I looked into it, and there's a lot. This is in the book. They went right down, and there's still a lot of issues with people harvesting too many fish, but they have come back up since that. I think the Louisiana. Local government have enforced more strict catch regimes. I know Jason, he's a lovely guy, super great company. Jason Catching's the guide we had. He's very vocal about the fact that they need to preserve the resource. And we met some guys who I know people would characterize them as rednecks. I don't want to get into any of that, but they were like, they couldn't believe we returned fish. They just could not understand why you would return. We met them at the dock. That's the only time we saw other fishermen, was at the dock. And they knew spots where the smaller fish congregate, I guess to spawn or to feed or whatever it was. And Jason just, he just shook his head in despair because they were killing everything they caught. I think that's quite a healthy fishery. It's a wonderful fishery. I don't want to repeat myself. But just wonderful sight fishing to fish in shallow water that weigh. I don't think we caught one under about 18 pounds. It was fantastic. And it's just the right degree of difficult, if you know what I mean. It wasn't permit fishing, it wasn't rooster fish, but it was difficult enough that you knew when you messed it up. And when you mess it up, they're gone. They don't hang around. They're gone. So. But wonderful fishery. But like all these fisheries, and as you alluded to, Pete, with the salmon, almost every fishery we have, there's something going on. So. And by the way, I just want to say what you guys are doing with the leaflets. as well as making me laugh out loud. Emma's sort of dropping them in the supermarket. I love it. I think it's great. But more, I've been really thrilled to share it and see people resharing what I've shared, and I think, I've had a lot of lively debates with people who are absolutely passionately committed to saving the salmon, and they say, well, that this won't work or this will work. Everyone needs to publicise. I personally, my feeling is we won't persuade the government. We just won't, because the money, those big money multinationals like Marine Harvest and the rest of them, they're big players. They've got influence. They've got stooges in the right places. We know that. But if you can persuade the general public not to eat salmon and kill the market, then you can stop it. And if you can, the stuff that, and I know there's been a lot of infighting in the, how should I put it, in the protect the salmon lobby. A lot of people have got different ideas about what we should do. Some people should be more aggressive. Some people feel that we should be more evidence-based, that we need to collect evidence and present it in a calm way rather than this smash and grab, like Corin Smith, who was the guy I was trying to remember his name a year ago. Corin Smith, who I went to I went to Providence Atoll, which we'll come on to, by the way, about 15 years ago, when nobody had been there, and it was amazing, an utterly amazing trip. Corin's a good guy. I know he's had fights with a lot of people that I know and respect. I just want us to come together and fight together, and if you feel that your way is to be jumping in the pens like Corin does, do it. If you feel that your way is hard scientific evidence collected and presented, which is what Mark Bilsby, who's a great guy, Mark and Ken at the Atlantic Salmon Trust, Ken has known more about salmon than I'll ever know in my life. We need to all be on the same page. We can do our different things, we can try different tactics, but we've got to recognise that we all want the same thing. And that thing is I've just been in a big spat with a guy called Carl Albert Hansen, who is a Norwegian guy. And Carl goes up and down the Norwegian coast, and he buys netted salmon and he resells them. This is wild Atlantic salmon. He says that every salmon he buys is legally netted. Very, very hard to prove or obviously disprove that. There's a lot of muttering. I don't know. I don't know if I've heard a lot of people saying that half of them are illegal. I don't know if that's true, and I'm not entitled to say that it's true because we don't know. But what I do know, ironically, is that in Norway, the Atlantic salmon is on the red list. Okay, so Atlantic salmon in Norway is considered to be an endangered species. And yet the Norwegian government allow Carl Albert Hansen alone, just one man with his truck, to buy 10 tons of Atlantic salmon this year, which he boasts about on Facebook, and resell them. And that's allowed. That's allowed. I cannot fathom how that can be possible. And although he protests that he catches them in East and West Finnmark, which is not so, the river that I absolutely love with a passion, probably, certainly one of my top 3 favourite salmon rivers is a river called the Riser, which I know we've talked about before, which is the Alta's kind of big sister in a way. The Alta is only a third of the length of the Riser. The Riser rises in Finnmark, but then flows into Troms. And because it empties into a fjord, which is just over the border from the West Finnmark, people are allowed to net in that then they're allowed to net in Finnmark. And those fish, don't tell me that the fish that are coming down from Hammerfest, where they all kind of roster before they start going to their different rivers, they're Riser fish. A lot of those fish are going to the Riser River. And I am not allowed to fish this year. That was the gaping hole in my calendar, was my visit to the Riser, because there's no sport fishing, catch and release sport fishing allowed on a river where there are people not 10 miles away catching wild Atlantic salmon up to 22 kilos. That's a Riser. That's either an Alta fish or a Riser fish. And the guy says, he doesn't understand why I'm angry. It's blood money. He is catching a fish that is endangered. and selling it. And the Norwegian government are letting him do it, and they're saying that's fine. They're allowing all of the hideous eco vandalism of the aquaculture, the open pens, and yet I cannot go and I've presented to the Norwegian government and to Carl 5 different studies that various people, Ken Whelan, that is, sorry, I forgot to name check him, Ken Whelan, Tarquin Millington Drake sent me some very interesting information, and the various other people, 5 studies that showed that properly done, catch and release has had such a negligible effect on salmon fatality rates that you can disregard it. You know, some studies less than 1%, which I found difficult to believe, if I'm honest. But I reckon that if 1 in 20 of the salmon, I don't think it's a bigger figure than 1 in 20 of the salmon that I've caught have died. I think it's less. So that's, what's that, 95% survival rate. And yet the Norwegian government won't let me do it. And I've got to tell you, Peter, I went to so as a photographer, what happens is that when people get married, you get the following call. And the call goes like this. So I've had this from so many friends. Charles Barrett and April Vokey, who I love to bits, phoned me up and April says, "Hi, do you want to come to the wedding?" Morten Berglund, my guide on the Riso, he's a lovely man, just the loveliest guy you could ever meet. "Do you want to come to the wedding?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I could rattle a load of people off. And I know what's coming. And I say, "Yeah, I'd love to." And they say, "Will you take the pictures?" And I don't phone up an accountant and say, "Hey, do you want to come to my wedding? And do you want to do the accounts?" But people, for whatever reason, feel that, you're going to say, "Yeah, of course I'll take the picture." And I always do. I've never said no, never. Some people are smart. Like April said to me, I remember she said, "Oh, the steelhead will be in." Yeah, this is in my book, by the way. And that's like a little, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take pictures," because you're going to get some fishing. But I went to this guy Morten Berglund's wedding by the banks of the Riso River, right there, prime time, 2nd week in July, 3rd week in July maybe, and there's salmon in that river, But not only was there nobody fishing, but there was no one guarding the river either, no one. And that means that come 3 in the morning. There's no roads up and down that river. So if you go up in a boat, you can park the boat in the bushes. You can do whatever you like. Now, I'm not saying this is happening, but I wouldn't be surprised because there's no one stopping those people. And Atlantic salmon are a very valuable commodity, So we need to be fishing to guard. I mean, it is an irony, People I know, when I tell my dear old mum I want to protect the salmon, she said, "Well, you like pulling them out the river." But we, as you said earlier, we are the only people who are going to do it. So, we need less of the. I was at the Atlantic Salmon Trust film night about 2 weeks ago, and they very kindly let me get up and make a little 5-minute speech about my book, which was lovely. But I didn't really talk about the book. I talked about what we need to do, and the fact that I'm sure. Do you remember the old Monty Python film, The Life of Brian? Do you remember that film?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Very much so.
So there's a great scene, one of the best scenes, and every scene is great in that film. But there's a great scene which I alluded to at this because we had a Q&A after the films were shown, and it's so Brian is selling sort of nibbles and tidbits at the Gladiatorium.
Yeah.
And he runs in.
Otters' noses.
Yes, yeah. Nipple chips. Yeah, you remember.
Yeah.
So he runs into John Cleese and Michael Palin and Graham Chapman, a lot of them. And he says he wants to join. They're the People's Popular Front of Judea. And he says, "I'd really like to join the People's Popular Front of Judea." And he said,
Splitters.
Yeah, correct. You know it. Yeah. So the only people we hate more than the Romans are the Judean People's Popular Front. It's brilliant. Like a lot of Monty Python's comedy, under the absolute slapstick, and the genius and the characterization of all these crazy characters, there is, like most good comedy, like great comedy, there is a real nub of truth in it. And, we cannot be the Judean People's Popular Front fighting the Popular People's Front of Judea while the Romans, which is Marine Harvest and Carl Albert Hansen, are laughing all the way to the bank and killing all the salmon. So we've got to stop fighting each other and make up our differences and recognise that we are going to have very different takes on what is needed. But do your thing. Do your thing. If you're Corin, get in the cage and make those pictures and make people think, I don't want to eat that. That looks wretched, which it is, and good for Corin. But similarly, I recognise that what Ken Whelan is doing, which is giving hard scientific data that is incontrovertible into our hands to say, look, this is what happens when we allow X, Y, and Z to happen. It's all, and we've got to fight all of these fronts, not one of them, not choose one over another, or say your campaign's no good, or we need to fight every front. So we need to be united and not be the Judean People's Popular Front, which it's so important, I do feel that this Rubicon is coming. If we are not careful, it's too late. When they're gone. For this guy, I'm talking about, Carl Albert Hansen, look him up on Facebook. He boasted that this year he sold over 10 tons of Atlantic salmon. He bought and sold 10 tons of Atlantic. He collected 2 tons in, I think it was a fortnight. If I've got it wrong, then I stand corrected. He doesn't catch. He buys and sells a lot of wild Atlantic salmon from the North Norwegian seaboard. And those fish have been designated, I'm going to say it one more time, as an endangered species by his own government, who is still allowing him to do it. And I just think they should hang their heads in shame. And I want everyone who's listening to make a noise, go and read about it, and write to the Norwegian government and tell them, what are you doing? I think he said something a bit Anglo-Saxon then. It makes me really, really angry. I love that river. I've got some enemies on that river. There are people who still believe that catch and release doesn't work, which it patently does. They die anyway. I've heard that a dozen times on that river from people who are not scientists, who can't show me any evidence. It's bullshit. Oh, there you go. There's some Anglo-Saxon. It's just not true. And it's just self-serving. We absolutely know. The fisheries, look at what's happened in Iceland. They put their fish back and the fisheries have burgeoned beyond belief. Their fishing is amazing. And rivers come back. Salmon are so hardy. If you give them a chance, they will come back. They don't need many. And the ricer, I just spoke to somebody yesterday who said the ricer, which I love. I so miss going there. And it's hard fishing, but I so miss seeing my friends there. I saw a lot of them at the wedding, by the way, but fishing is different. Being on the bank, in one of the little Gapper Hook shelters, and there's young kids there. There's a kid called Christa Vangen. And when I first met, he guided me when he was 14 years old. He's a lovely kid. Generations of his family have driven boats up and down that river. He's one of the best boatmen, if not the best boatman I've ever seen on that river. At 14, he's now about 20. I don't know. I hope he's listening. And good on you, Krista. But I really try, and this is in the book. I really hope that when Krista's my age, that river is not just. So the last chapter in my book, Pete, was called "The River of Ghosts." And my wife said, don't put it in. Don't end on a low. She's my sternest critic, but I promise you. And there's 42 chapters in the book. 41 of them are crash bang wallop accounts of catching big fish or losing big fish, adventures in dugout canoes and being attacked by hornets and Christ knows what. But the last chapter is called The River of Ghosts. And it's about the ricer. I lost a very big fish on the ricer about 6 years ago. Two lovely Finnish guys came up the river and I was playing a big fish and they were miserable because I got the spot, right? So the spot, anyone who knows ricer, the Sparkfoss, the Black Falls is one of the big fish pools on the ricer. And you rarely get that spot. It's a zone system. So you've got to be up early, camp out on to get that first cast through the pool. And I fished it in August, and when most people have gone back to work, so the prime weeks on ricer, July. Fished it in August, got the pool. Terror! You've got to read the book. Go straight to that chapter, The River of Ghosts, and I hooked a huge fish in that pool. And these 2 Finns came up, and their first reaction was, they were disappointed because I was there, and they'd obviously hoped to fish it first. But then they saw I was playing a fish. They came up. And one of them said, only one of them could speak any English at all. And he said, big fish? And I said, it's the fish of my life, which it was. And there's, the title of the book is a joke. The fish of a lifetime could be plural, could be singular, could be the first one, could be the biggest one, could be. So it's a play on the fact that fish can be singular or plural. But I said to this guy, this is a fish of my life. And he looked at me quite quizzically. He couldn't quite work out, and the language barrier and so on. And then this fish jumped out, and these two fins, Pete, I'll never forget it. There's a Scandinavian thing. When something's exciting, they do this. They go, oi, 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 oi. Like that. They both did it in perfect synchronicity and made me laugh. And one of them said, that's a 20 kilo salmon, which you probably know is 44 pounds. So a kilo is 2.2 pounds. So the other one said no. And I said, I think it is. It was massive, but massive. And he said, no, that's a 25 kilo salmon. Now, 25 is 55 pounds. And I've no reason to doubt it. And after another, maybe half an hour of not getting anywhere near landing it, but I did get it quite close, and we were starting to talk about what we do. There was no landing net, and we started to talk through the end game. And then this thing jumped out really close to us, and it was a coloured fish. It wasn't fresh, but it was just massive. I mean, I'll never forget it. And then it turned around and it did another, like a cartwheel, like a flip, right out of the water, which is rare for a coloured fish, as I'm sure you know. But it was stupendously big. I'll never, ever forget it. And the hook came out. And when the hook came out, and we just be talking about Monty Python, I did that John Cleese thing where he falls to his knees and he sort of, you must know what I'm talking about, and he sort of just curls up in like a fetal position. And I could have cried. I mean, because you're never going to hook another one. I mean, statistically, that's like winning the lottery, and you're not going to win the lottery twice. And these two fins, who were lovely, I don't know their names, but they were lovely guys. And they sort of gently, very tentatively patted me on each shoulder, because I was in this sort of catatonic state. And I'll never forget it. I'll never ever forget it. And I know that's not going to happen. You don't hook two of those in your lifetime. Never. It's impossible statistically. But I love that river so much. And when you fish that river, there's a chance that you'll hook a fish of that size. And a lot of my friends there, Morton, the guy whose wedding I photographed, his best fish, 54 pounds. 54 pounds. One of his best men, whose name I've forgotten, 52 pounds. There's the guy who first invited me to the Otter, is a lovely man called Jens Olaf Flekker, who does a lot of good work to conserve salmon in Norway, despite how mad they are and how I don't think they're mad. I think they're corrupt. I think it's rotten I think the government are in the pocket of those big businesses. So I don't think it's mad at all. I think it's cynical and corrupt. And Jens fights with everything he's got, and he's almost like an Ori Vigfusson of Norway. Jens invited me there. He took me to the place where he caught the fish the year before we first went, which is 2011. He caught a 51-pound fish. I mean, that's a river. And yet, we're not allowed to fish it. But the nets, and those fish travel along that coastline, can net very, very close. They can net right up to the border of Tromsø, which is not far from the mouth of that river. And the salmon farms can do their thing and pollute and destroy that whole habitat, and have that artificially sort of massively high proliferation of sea lice and all the bad things they do. And we're the victims. Sorry, we're the villains. We're not the villains. We're not the villains. We're the good guys. I know that. And we just got to keep fighting. But if and when you get the book, read that chapter, The River of Ghosts, because obviously that is an allusion to the fact that I don't want to be some broken old man telling my kids about these mythical creatures, and the river's only got the ghosts of those great big salmon in it. I want them to still be there, and we need to do that. So so I did put it in despite my wife's protestations.
And you make some.
Go on, sorry.
And you make some really, really salient points there as well, Matt, about what's going on there, because that guy's never going to pack up because he earns loads of money from it. and what you say about us all singing from the same hymn sheet. And, that's what we've got to do. And you've got to find your own way. And one of the reasons I did this leaflet thing is that, and you mentioned petitions earlier, and I always think that they're really useful, and probably governments they don't look at the contents, they just probably look at how many people have signed it, and then that's that. But I think we need to be more vocal. And one of the reasons for doing this leaflet drop was to get people to interact directly with the end user, the person who might be buying the sound. Now, we're not going to change the world, but what I wanted to do with this is to get anglers to say, actually, I can get up and interact with people and tell them how I feel. Because I think one of the, there are many great things about social media, and obviously, and we probably talked about it before, there aren't so many, but I think the issue with that is that people flick through and they've forgotten about it. And my thought with the leaflet was that if we actually had something physical, we could give someone. Now, there is a high degree of risk that they may throw it away and it never get. But there may be, if you can get just a few more people to say, actually, I'm going to scan that QR, I'm going to read it, then why isn't there salmon on the menu? Then all of a sudden, that spreads out that way. But it was to mobilize people and say, like you're saying, you can do your own thing. And you said very kindly about Emma going into the supermarket.
Yeah.
Other people have done that as well. Some people might not want to do that, and I understand that. But, I've seen this, Paul Jennings, I need to shout you out. I've seen them. He's stuck them on road signs, on roundabouts, on all sorts of Adrian Gross Hodge on a train so that people can see these things.
I saw it.
If we can just engage people, and like you say, it doesn't matter if we're all fighting on all and firing on all cylinders in a lot of places, that's no bad thing.
Yeah.
And it would be great. I only knew about and that interaction with people. I only knew about that film night afterwards.
Yeah.
And that would have been great. I'd have come along. Yeah. And that's where I think we could all, like you say, we've got to put things aside, no matter how you feel about things, but we've just got to fight on all fronts. And like you say so rightly, if Corin goes in those pens, or Michael, or whoever it is, that's great, because we do need more radical things. And we're in a background where we've had the anti-climate thing, where people are gluing themselves. That's not going down very well. They're spoiling the people they're trying to interact with, and they're holding up daily life. That's not helping. Yeah, if we can engage people in a positive way as well and say, look, don't eat this shit. Don't eat this shit. Correct. It's not good. Yeah. And if they can understand that, then we're getting there. I know we're not going to change the world. That having been said, and I've not made a big thing about it, I've so far sent out 9,000 leaflets to people.
Good for you, Pete.
So if there's even 5% of people who say, I'm not going to eat salmon, I've just read this, boom, we're in the game a little bit. And then that feeds out.
Absolutely. And another 5% who say, give me some of those leaflets, and then they spread it out. It is a viral thing. I showed my mum your leaflet on my phone. My mum's 85 years old. She lives just up the road from me. I moved her up to Cambridge so that, she's in a wheelchair. She's a great old stick. I love her to bits. I do a shop. She's also a monumental pain in the arse. I hope she's not listening. But she always says, "Oh, can you buy me some smoked salmon?" So I do her shopping for her, or Kath, my wife, does. And we look out for her and so on. And I said, "Mum, I'm not buying smoked salmon. I'll buy you anything else. You can have smoked trout. You can have anything that's not farmed salmon, or something, but I wouldn't buy that for her." And she gets pissed. She really. And then I showed her the leaflet, and I said, "Look, read it. Do you still want it?" And I said, "Look at that fish." And I said, "Here's some more." And I showed her some of the stuff that Mike Froding's done, some of the more of Corin's pictures. And I said, "Just read that. And if you still want smoked salmon," she is not going to have smoked salmon again. And that's down to you and Corin. And then I got her to read some of the Atlantic Salmon Trust stuff, and she doesn't understand why I go fishing. I don't understand why I go fishing. We talked about it last time. It's something that's so hardwired into us. And certainly I think in my case and your case, something we've done since we were so young. that we can't really, objectively analyse why we do it. But I love it. I know this. I know it's a good thing. It's good for people's mental health. Certainly good for my mental health. Because I photograph kids for a living. Which I want to be more involved in. I'm 57 now, Pete, and I want to be much more involved in conservation. I look at people like Fergal Sharkey as an inspiration. And if he's listening to this, Fergal, what a great thing you're doing, because there's the salmon, which is one thing, but there's also all the terrible things that are happening to our water. And our water is our water, and it is not a commodity to be bought and sold for profit. And you look at the CEO of Thames Water, Southern Water. They all got paid an absurd amount of money by themselves. They haven't built one reservoir since the water industry. It's not an industry. It's our water. It's an essential. It's an essential thing for a life. And I just can't. Forget your political colours. This is not. This is not a Labour thing or a Conservative thing. Forget all of that. This is too important to say, well, I voted for this or that. This is just plain not right. And whatever your views of privatisation of this or nationalisation of that, it cannot be the case that our water is there to be bought and sold for the benefit of shareholders and CEOs. And Fergal Sharkey, I remember Fergal Sharkey is probably a little bit older than me. So when I was a snot-nosed little kid at secondary school, I loved the Undertones. I loved them. I just loved them. And if anyone doesn't know, go and look up the Undertones, which was Fergal Sharkey's band. They were brilliant. They were just brilliant. And now, he's such an unlikely champion, but he speaks eloquently, he's passionate, and he's an inspiration, and good on him. And I want to see everyone, follow him. If you're listening to this, follow Fergal Sharkey on Twitter, on Instagram, on every platform you can find him on, and support what he's doing, because he's calling out the government for, I'm not going to beat around the bush. They are allowing people to dump human shit, into the sea, where people swim, where children swim, where people want to fish and surf. And that, if that's right, that can't be right. This is not the 17th century. This is the 21st century. And I've written to George Eustice, who was it's been such a merry-go-round. I don't even know who the Environment Secretary is this week. But Minister, I should say. So the Minister for the Environment for a long time was George Eustice. I wrote to him so many times, I cannot tell you. And how many times did he answer? You know the answer, Pete. Never.
Yeah.
So, I've got to say, George, I ain't voting for you or your friends, because whatever else, that is just plain wrong. And it's incontrovertibly wrong. And so I'd love to see people back what Fergal does. And I'd like to see fishermen get behind all of these things and be more active, because I know a lot of people would rather talk about the latest salmon, the magic fly, or which spay rod do you recommend? And it's all good, and we can talk for hours about new flies, new lines, and so on. But if there's no fish in those rivers, forget it. Or in the sea, there's not. Forget your new line, forget your new rod. There's nothing to fish for. So we've got to.
That's a really good point. And part of my little tiny thing that I'm trying to do was driven by people ranting on places like Facebook and stuff like that. That's not going to do anything.
No.
And so I thought I got sick and tired of it. And I had Ben Jailer, I've got to apologise to you, because I had a massive rant to him about it and said this was what made me want to do this. It's writing something down's really, but you're actually preaching to people who feel the same, be it politics. And it is. It's exactly like you say, that politics, football, religion, we're not going to agree about any of these things anyway, but let's fight for one common thread, and let's get on with, and let's be positive. Let's affect change by getting off our asses and doing something about it. But that's enough of that little rant there. We're going to come on to the book very shortly, but as a well-seasoned traveller, I'd love to know, do you ever get tense at the carousel in arrivals, whether you're cameras, whether your rods, and have you had any close shaves? Have you had stuff go missing? Because as the world opens up, and I went to Italy in the summer, and everything worked out really, really well. And generally, I've not had too many issues. But for somebody like yourself that's relying on that stuff, do you ever get tense when you're standing at that arrivals waiting for your luggage to
Right.
appear?
That's a great question. And I'm sure a lot of people empathise with that question. So the answer is yes, a resounding yes. First thing is my cameras never leave me. So I have found, I hope no one from the air industry is listening to this. So I've found a way to get all of my camera bag weighs 22 kilos. And if I put my laptop in, that's 25 kilos. I think that's right. Sounds ridiculous. People say, "Oh, you've got a bad back." Yeah, well, that's why. That's why, because it's all in a rucksack. I use a rucksack that it fits. It was designed to fit perfectly into that. You know that little metal frame where they say your bags cannot be bigger than this. So a company, I can't know what they're called. It'll come to me. They designed a rucksack that perfectly fitted in there. It's in exact dimensions. But if you put, well, that glass is heavy, right? So people say, oh, these lovely little Sony camera, these new mirrorless cameras, light, small, they are, but you still need lenses, and lenses are made of glass, and I hope they always will be. And glass is heavy. So people see me at the airport, and I've had lots of rival comments about so I wear my big Sims jacket, and I actually wear an old one that's got more pockets, and I fill those pockets with lenses. The poacher's pocket has a laptop in it, and I clank up there, and they can't touch you. I don't know if anyone knows that. They can't. Now, I shouldn't say this because some cynical bastard from Michael O, whatever his name is, from Ryanair saying, "Hey, close that loophole." But they can't touch you. So as long as your bag weighs whatever it is, 8 kilos, 10 kilos, you can be wearing your camera gear, right? So all my pockets, there's a 14 mil in there, there's a 1635 in there. I wear cargo trousers with enormous pockets on them too. And I clank up there, and actually there's a better way now that I found, which is take the jacket off and fold it on the trolley, that you bring your bags up, and people just see it as a jacket. That's your jacket. But actually that jacket weighs about 12 kilos because it's full of lenses. And then you don't have to clank up to I don't know why I'm telling you this, Pete, because someone's going to listen and I'm going to regret it. But that way I get all of my cameras, which are obviously very fragile, into the cockpit rather than in the hole where they are going to get broken. I always take the kitchen sink, which everyone who knows me knows I'm the guy. If you haven't got a line, if you broke the fly line, Matt will have one, and that's nice. It's nice to be able to do that. But it also means if I break my fly line, which I sometimes do, or I don't know, I always want, it's no good at home, whatever it is, whether it's some stupid great popper that you suddenly realise is the fly you need, or I don't know, wire trace or whatever, it's no good at home. So I take the kitchen sink, and it's often, and the times I haven't, I've often regretted it. So I buy bags. I've asked Yeti and various other people to make a bag that weighs nothing, right? So no frames, no, there's some lovely bags you can get. Well, I just went to Brazil with Paddy Berger. He used to play for Liverpool. Loveliest guy you could ever meet. Paddy's bag already weighs 4.5 kilos before you put anything in it, and that's, to me, and I think that's crying out. If somebody spots that loophole, and realizes what people want is just a very light, hard-wearing shell. Yeti are kind of there, but the bag's not big enough. I want a bag that will swallow up all that stuff, and if there's space inside afterwards, fine, no problem. Because for instance, puffer jackets weigh nothing. So if you throw another puffer jacket in there or a couple of t-shirts to bulk it out, happy days. But yeah, it is an issue, and the airlines now are trying to catch up after COVID, so they are going to try and nail you for everything. So for instance, that weight thing is a good tip. Trying to get rods. I work with Hardy. I shoot a lot of pictures for Hardy, and obviously we've all got our favourite brands and and I've used some brilliant fishing rods. You rarely find a bad fishing rod now. But what I love about Hardy's rods, you can't break them because they're made from this Cintrix material. And this is, I don't want to plug it anymore, but they sent me some 6-piece spey rods, and I went to Iceland to fish for sea trout in the end of August. You would not know they're a six-piece rod. They're just fabulous rods. They're unbreakable. I used to break a lot of rods, but mainly they fit in your bag. Six-piece, 14-foot rod fits in your bag, and that means you don't have to have a second. You'd have to have a kiss case. Remember the old plastic? I've still got one. Occasionally I use it, but a kiss case is heavy, and that's the second piece of kit. They're going to hit you for it. So if you can put them all in one bag, yes. And the other thing I'd say is split stuff up with your pal, so that if one of your bags doesn't turn up, which increasingly has happened, then the other guy can. Do you see what I mean? You've got enough kit to fish with. And I've also said to a lot of the lodges, have spare kit, because it's become a thing. Lufthansa lost my baggage for 5 weeks after I came home from Alaska. 5 weeks. It was in Frankfurt. And one last tip, Pete, very quickly. I know other people do this. Apple make a thing. I can't think what it's called.
Yeah, I've got one. That little
tracker.
coin-sized thing. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
Don't let your kids play with it, because they'll swallow it, because it looks like a sort of after dinner mint or something.
Yeah.
But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. When you get on on some little plane, you know it's there. You can check on your phone. You say, right, almost. I did have a real scare when I was in Brazil, because we got on the plane and they put one of my bags in the float of the plane. The float planes that land on the water. And because it blocked out the reception, I didn't think we had the bag, and I had a panic attack. And actually, when we got out, the guy said, "Calm down, you idiot! It's in there, and that's why you don't."
Yeah.
So they can cause you a bit, and I've got to apologise to those guys, because I was having a little bit of a freak out when it was right there. But that's a great thing, and you know where it is. And as this technology increases, we'll be able to know where it is anywhere in the world, and that means that when Lufthansa say, "I don't know where it is," you'll be able to say, "It's in Frankfurt Airport, in terminal whatever," and diddly, and you'll get your stuff back. I think things are calming down. There was a lot of, getting off an aeroplane through this year has not been nice, because your bags may or may not turn up. You may have to wait an hour and a half before they unload the plane and get stuff on the carousel. I think that's slowly coming back to normal, but it is a slow process. But we'll get there, I think.
Nice.
So yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's a great tip. And like I say, that Apple thing, I took one to Italy, and they are really, really good news. And like you say, if you get a bit hungry, you can nibble one, because like you say, they look quite tasty. But I wanted to move on. And again, I always like to stress on here that I don't get given these things to say nice things about. I've seen the online version of Matt's book. I've got one Christmas present this year, and it is Matt's book. And I was saying to him off mic that I saw Emma walk in with it. So, it's been bought for me. I'm not, Matt doesn't pay to be on here, or I'm not, I invited him on, because I enjoy his company, but having seen the book, it's absolutely beautiful. So I've got no axe to grind other than I'm a fan. You've alluded to a little bit about it, in the conversation so far, but how would you describe this book to anyone listening?
Okay. So how would I describe? I would say it's a collection of my travels with a fly fishing rod. For the first, I think we talked about this last time, Peter. I came to fly fishing quite late. I didn't start fly fishing until I was in my probably early 20s. I grew up course fishing with floats and worms and what have you, and then match fishing. We talked about it last time. But I started traveling with a fly rod in the late 90s. And I Christopher Robinson, who's sadly not with us anymore at Roxton's, started to give me job after job, and then other people started. Simon Gorsworth, who I think is just a wonderful guy, started to buy my pictures. Excuse me, for Rio. And it spread. Lots of people, lots of great people reached out. Gareth Jones at Airflow is a lovely guy, brilliant fisherman. Sims, Hardy, obviously, as I've mentioned, and and a lot of lodges would say, "Will you come down, shoot some pictures, maybe do an article or two?" And people used to, after a while, a lot of friends would say, you should do a book. And, and it always was there. And then you do more and more and more. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do a book until it is a comprehensive sort of almost like an encyclopedia. And I know that's never going to be the case. You are never going to cover all the, there's a lot of places that I still long to go to, and I won't go to all of them in my lifetime. But I thought it was pretty comprehensive. Let's put it that way. And then the real catalyst was COVID. So when COVID came along, as we've talked about, my mainstream work as a photographer was photographing kids for advertising, babies especially, to advertise baby foods and nappies and so on. Very stressful. I love it. It's like permit fishing. Getting a smile out of a 9-month-old kid is like trying to catch a permit. You don't quite know what you did, but you sort of feel like you did something right. Occasionally it happens. But it was like a pressure cooker it's like bedlam, the noise and the mayhem and I got girls who work, mainly girls, some guys who work for me. Girls are, in my opinion, and this is going to be this is a terrible sexist generalization. The girls seem to be great with the kids on the whole. Big hairy assistants with beards who are 6 foot tall often scare the wits out. I do that. They're often terrified of me, but I've got some lovely. I want to give a shout to Joe Renshaw, Louise Havard, a bunch of wonderful girls and guys who work for me, and someone would make that kid laugh, almost always. I loved it, but it was a lot of noise and stress, and so fishing was like the antidote. And so I found that more and more, I wanted to. I did the right thing. I took my family traveling for a year, which I told you about last time. But for my own sort of mental health, the solitude of fishing, is and the camaraderie of fishing as well. But I love the solitude of fishing, and it's the opposite of all that craziness. And then obviously when COVID came along, I couldn't photograph kids, couldn't photograph anything, and you couldn't leave the house, as you know. And I thought, and I couldn't do any hosted fishing trips; they were all cancelled. Couldn't go and shoot pictures for lodges or whatever. So I thought, what am I going to do? And it was blindingly obvious what to do the book. So I phoned up a lovely guy, an absolutely lovely guy, David Pearce, who is a world famous designer. He worked for Pentagram, who are probably the most celebrated design group in the world. He then set up Tatham Pearce, which is another wonderful, very, very talented bunch of guys who are one of the great design groups. And David had said to me, I'll design your book for you. And I got in touch with him. He sent back some designs, and I hope he's not upset if he's listening, because he's so talented. And they were beautiful designs, but they weren't what I visualized in my head. And it was very difficult to say to someone who's so talented, I want to do it. And you can't say to someone, I want you to technically deliver what I want, because he's too talented for that. So I very politely said, David, they're lovely, but I want to do it, and I'm not going to insult you by asking you to be the technician. So I sat down. I had such a strong idea of what I wanted to do, and I did a graphic design degree about 350 years ago when I was at college. I started out doing graphic design and then fell in love with photography, but I got a basic grounding in graphic design. And I thought I could do this. I had such a strong image of what I wanted. So I spent about 3 weeks watching YouTube. This is a great thing with, we weren't born with this, the current generation grew up with this stuff. But to me, it's a gold mine that, we probably appreciate more because we didn't grow up with it. But I watched a guy in New Zealand doing a 3-hour YouTube tutorial about how to use a thing called InDesign, which is an Adobe program. So I've grown up with Photoshop, a wonderful program called Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom, which I recommend to any aspiring photographer as the best way to convert your digital images into whatever you want them to be. So I kind of had a handle on that. It's very similar. quite intuitive. But this guy showed you exactly how to use it, shortcuts, potential mistakes. And I designed it, and then I hooked up with a guy called Simon Barr at Field Sports and Selena. I should give Selena a shout out. And I said, look, this is my design, but I don't know how to get it to press. And Simon put me in touch with a guy who works for him called Mark Cowling, who kind of just made it print ready, because there were things that I had done wrong, which I knew there would be. But we got it absolutely print ready. And then a printer let us down at the last minute, which was really frustrating because everything was ready. And then the printer said, no, we can't do it after all. And then Simon reached out to another guy called Ian Maxted, who's a very, very experienced print. He's an authority on print. And he bailed us out. He got a great company in Poland. We were not renowned for their print, and I said, great, but I didn't feel they'd ever done a project like this before. And I said, can I come and be on press? And they were happy for me to do that. I flew to Poznan, which most football fans will know because of the Manchester City celebration. That's all I knew about Poznan. Poznan's a lovely little city in Poland. Drove up the road for an hour to this state-of-the-art printing factory, and when I saw the first sheet come off of the machine, it was a feeling, it's hard to express, the relief and the pride, that it happened, that we'd done it. And we had some hiccups, there were things that I said, can we make that lighter, or that's out of register, but they printed it beautifully, I think. And in a hurry, they got us out of a hole, and the guy who sort of held my hand was a lovely guy called Magic, and I'm going to send him this podcast. He was a lovely guy, and they let me stay. We had issues. We had a power cut because Poland is obviously close to Ukraine with all that's going on there, but they were lovely people, and they made it happen. So yeah, we got it done, and I then I went off to Brazil. I'm going to tell you, Peter, I went off to Brazil, and I hadn't seen the book. And my wife sent me a text, and we were in the middle of nowhere. She said, something's arrived, and she sent me a smudgy little picture of the book, and she said, it looks amazing. And my wife, believe me, is a very, very stern critic. She said, it looks amazing. I came back, and it's just a lovely feeling to see it finally, realised. And the people who've written things to me, I got a message from Jack Meredith, who's an old friend, last night. Jack Meredith, lovely man, a great fisherman. And I was choked up. I don't mind admitting it. I was so choked with pride and emotion, that someone who I really respect and am very fond of said such lovely things, and I've had a lot of those messages. And it really, I realised that in a way, this book is a way to say thank you to so many people, who've helped. I've been very lucky, and a lot of people, people see all these big fish and amazing places, but that's because of so many other people, their generosity and their help. So I realize, and the more I look back at the book now, the more I realize that it's actually, a lot of it's about the people that I fished with as much as the fish or the places. So very quickly, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And at the back, hopefully you have got one for Christmas. There is a list of all those people that I fish with, and I'm sure I will have missed people out, but it's a long list, and I'm really proud to be friends with all those people. So thank you to everybody.
That's nice. And as someone who's taught themselves in design, I'm thrilled that you found a YouTube video, because I've sort of learnt by trial and error and have a pretty good, and like you say, a design thing, when you have a very clear idea in your mind, it's very difficult to shake that. And I'm very lucky, with our little magazine, having John Ogborn, I place everything and the order and all those sorts of things is very personal. And then he sprinkles that glitter onto it. And I trust him 100%. I say you can do, and finding that balance when it's not just my baby, but it feels like it's your baby. And I know exactly what you mean when you were waiting. I have sleepless nights when the new mag is about to be delivered to me. And then I have another sleepless night when it's going out to people, because you want them to feel the way that you did and you feel about it. And mine's very kind of similar in that it means so much to me. Fishing means so much to me, and it is like a thank you each quarter for me to fishing
Yeah.
and what it means. And I know exactly what you mean about that. The difference is, and we don't cut any corners on paper thickness and everything else. And I wanted to stress that this book is a tome. It is a big coffee table book full of lush. It's the sort of thing I suspect that you're not going to sit down and read. You're going to put that down, look at it, and go, "Oh yeah," and then put it down for a bit, and then keep coming back to it. It kind of, in some respects, it's a bigger version. The only thing I can get near to it is Topher Brown's salmon
Yeah,
book.
well, I don't know if you know,
I think
I took about 80% of the pictures for Topher's book.
There you go. There you go. I
Topher
didn't.
hates it when people say, because I've been with him, people say, Topher, I love your book. The pictures are amazing. Because Topher, he wants people to say the copy's amazing. And it's great. And it's very comprehensive study. And Topher's a great friend of mine. And absolute. So I'm taking a group of friends to Eastern Canada next year, absolutely on Topher's recommendation. So obviously the Kola Peninsula is off limits until that wretched little man is no longer with us. Well, I thought, well, where are we going to go? So after, Topher is an authority. So we're going to go and fish the Matapedia and the Restigouche, which I fish, which are on the up. Huge fish, magnificent fish. I mean, and that's Topher. So if you want to know about where to go in Eastern Canada, Topher's your man, and he's a lovely guy, brilliant instructor. He's actually, I think he won't mind me saying this, he's happier teaching than he is fishing. He loves to teach people how to spade cast, and there's a chapter about me fishing with him in the Gaspé in the book, what an amazing time we had, and he's just a lovely man. So if he's listening, good on you, Topher. He's a great guy.
Nice. No, it is a beauty, and I think it is one of those ones that you will dip in and out of, and the places that you've been, the people that you've been there with, comes through wonderfully well. And it is as I said, I've only seen the online. Christmas morning, I'll be sitting through that, and I will do my utmost not to be very antisocial on Christmas Day. But I think it's lovely. It portrays, and it may be places that people are never going to go to, but it doesn't matter. It's fly fishing, and it is. I think it captures perfectly what fishing is about and the company that we share. And I see so many parallels with fly culture and what we try and do with that. It's a similar sort of hymn sheet that we're singing from that point of view. You're putting some of the pictures out on social media, and if people want to connect with you, if they want to get a copy of the book, how do they go about doing that, Matt?
So we're only selling the book online. The middlemen, I'm afraid, just take such a huge bite out of the it's very expensive to make a book like this, and I don't want, I've heard people grumbling. So the book is sold only through one channel, which is www.thefishofalifetime.com. Now you'll find links to that in my Instagram. You'll find it on my website, which is www.mattharrisflyfishing.com. You'll find it. It's on the Field Sports sort of e-commerce site, so Field Sports Media, who publish Field Sports Journal and Gundog Journal and various different things. If you can't find it, find me and ask me, and I'll point you through it. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook. You'll find me, and people have been very kind. There's a lovely write-up in Trout and Salmon this month, just giving it a plug. There's going to be more online reviews coming. I've found people have been very, very kind and very helpful. But if you can't find it, Matt Harris at mattharris.com is my email. Send me an email. I'll point you straight to it.
Nice one. Did you find, just interestingly, because I've had another rise in paper costs, did paper costs come into that for you? Did you find they continue to rise?
Massively, which is why, I just went out for lunch with a good friend of mine, William Midwood, a lovely guy and a brilliant salmon fisherman. and he inadvertently showed me a text from another friend, Bill Warburg, who's a lovely man and a great salmon fisherman that I've fished with all over. And Bill said, £99.99 for a book. That's a bit OTT. Bill owns half of Norfolk, half of Lithuania, I think. He owns a huge wheat farm somewhere in Eastern Europe. Bill can afford that book, let me tell you. He's currently sailing around the world, for instance. But for people who say that it's a lot of money for a book, it's a big book. I mean, the book weighs 5 kilos, and the paper, as you said, was, the price of the paper went up massively during COVID, and then subsequently, obviously, because of Putin's, ugly little war in the Ukraine. So yes, the costs they doubled. The project from when we first talked about doing it to actually producing it, the costs have doubled. So yes, I feel your pain too, Pete, because it is, it's difficult, and until the world's not in a great place, and I just got into a spat with a Danish guy. I regularly tag Ukraine. I think that Zelensky is the first great hero of the 21st century. And people say, don't stick to fly fishing, don't get involved in politics. To anyone who says that, I had a spat with a Danish guy who wrote to me and said, I'm not interested. I regularly put up the Ukrainian flag on my Instagram site. I often tag my posts with Slava Ukraini, and fuck Putin, if you'll excuse my French, because I think the guy's a monster. He's a genocidal psychopath. And if people say, I'm not interested in your politics, well, there won't be any fly fishing. If we let Vladimir Putin do what he's doing, this guy is Danish. And as I pointed out to him, and I've got a lot of wonderful Danish friends, by the way, wonderful people, but the Danes, if people know their history, the Danes tried to stay out the Second World War. They said, we're going to be neutral. And what did the Germans do? They marched, and the Germans, I shouldn't say the Germans, the Nazis. And just as it wasn't the Germans, it was the Nazis. And it's not the Russians. I've got dear, dear friends. Some of the people that I love most in the world are Russian. I was talking to Justin Miller, who's a great mate of mine and a lovely man who you should get on, a steelhead nut from the west coast of the States. We fished in Kamchatka together, Brazil together, Norway together. He's a big bear of a man and a lovely guy, brilliant fisherman. And Justin and I fished in Kamchatka in the far east of Russia. And the guys there, Sasha, who's a big, big bear of a man, Kirill Kazashin, who's a scientist, incredibly bright. These are lovely people. These aren't monsters. They're Russian. Vova Masayev saved my life on the Yakanga River. No doubt. He made a fire. I don't know. Still don't know. He built a fire. I fell in the river. I got out somehow, and he somehow made a fire. And if you're on the banks of the Yakanga River in early June, it's not easy to. I don't know what he did. I was delirious. I think I was in very grave danger. I had hypothermia. I really don't remember it very well, but I know he made a fire, and I don't know how he did it. There's nothing. There's no wood. There's some soggy birch twigs. Is all there is. He may have set fire to the dry bag. I don't know what he did, but that guy is the loveliest guy and the most generous person you could ever meet. And he's Russian. He's Russian. That does not make him a monster. That makes him someone who just happened to be born, in a certain location, as any of us can be. So don't hate the Russians, hate Putin. And as I say, if people don't like if people say we shouldn't talk politics on a fly fishing podcast or a social media platform, if we don't fight against Putin, there won't be any fly fishing. There may not even be a world to live in. So, we need to stand up to the guy and call him out and let people know what we all think of him. That's it. That's the end of my rant for the day. But
I think that's a very fair rant as well. And I've no argument against that. Good. So I agree wholeheartedly with everything. Matt, it's been brilliant to catch up. We've spoken well over an hour now, and it's been lovely to catch up. It's been lovely to talk salmon with you. It's been lovely to talk about the book as well, which I hope listeners will take a look at. And like I say, on the social media, there's some awesome pictures Matt is putting out and trailing the book a little bit, so you get a sense of what it's about. And it's one of those ones. Is it a limited run?
Yeah, 2,000 copies, and they're selling fast, which is good. That's nice. So, and
Yeah.
very quickly, I'm so grateful to everyone who's bought a copy because it isn't cheap, and I appreciate not everyone can afford it. So the people who can or who can just afford it, thank you. I really appreciate the support. We printed 2,000 because storage is expensive. If we sell out, then we'll print more. But we didn't want to print 10,000 of them sitting in a warehouse. The modern printing is very different from the printing that I knew from my early days in the advertising industry. It's amazing. It's amazing how accurate the print can be. So, as I say, it's probably cheaper to reprint and then not incur any storage costs. So 2,000. If you want a copy, buy it now because they are selling out. And so, I know they sound like a terrible sales pitch, but they are selling out. So, be warned. But yeah, and I just, it's so nice to see people. I'm going to start posting them on my social media platforms that people have been so kind and sent such lovely messages. And it, it really does mean a lot. It's lovely. It's really lovely. So good on everyone who's done that. Thank you.
Nice one. Matt, it has been brilliant to catch up. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
It's a pleasure, Pete. It's an absolute pleasure, as it was last time, and I hope there'll be more times. And I want to send you an article about how to photograph fish properly. Have a look at it. If you want to publish it, I'd love you to. And there's no charge on that. And that's not because you're plugging my book, but I do think I want to see people photograph fish properly. Make sure they're wet. Make sure that they are not 20 yards from the river. Make sure that you do everything. And so I should just add in the book, after all of the chapters and all of the good stuff about salmon conservation and fish conservation in general, there's a double page, no pictures, just copy. And it's a sort of a simple guide to photographing fish and how you photograph fish and then release them unharmed. And I'd love as many people as possible who buy that book to just study those 2 pages and do that, so that our fish, so part of defending fishing, and we do need to defend it, is making sure that people can see that we care about the fish, and we want them to be sustainable and to carry on, making little fish, and the only way we're going to do that and be perceived to be doing that is making sure that we catch and release all our fish, and that when we photograph them, we don't photograph them to death, which people do often innocently, not realizing. So keep the fish wet. Don't remove them from the water if it's possible. It's often possible to take a picture of the fish under the water, and it makes a great picture. But if you do want to remove from the water, keep it very close to the water. There's a lot. I mean, we could do a whole new podcast on that, but please just have a read of that chapter. I'm going to send it to you, Pete. If you're happy to publish it, I'd love you to. It's short. It's two sides of A4. Look after the fish. Put them back, whatever they are, unless it's sustainable. And there's very few sustainable fisheries where we can kill the fish now. So do the right thing. Take lovely pictures. Put them back, and then our kids can fish and our grandchildren can fish.
Nicely put, and I agree with all of that as well, Matt, as well. So thank you once again. It's been great to catch up.
Lovely. Thanks, Pete. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. If you have, perhaps you'll take the time to subscribe. Perhaps even you might even leave me a little review as well. I'm told this helps. We will never charge you for this. It will always be free. And so if you can, then I think that helps people find us. So I'd greatly appreciate that. But thank you so much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.